All right, my name is Mark Werwath. I am the Executive Director of the Office of Professional Education for Northwestern's McCormick School of Engineering. I want to welcome all of you to our our inaugural industry night. We're here to celebrate startups, we're here to celebrate venture capital, and we're here to listen to a panel that's been assembled expertly by Julian Cheng, who's an alum of the program. Before I introduce Julian, I will go through basically some opening statements here. So first of all, welcome to alum and to students, honored guests. Thank you for coming. OPE, if you haven't heard of it, the Office of Professional Education is a recently formed organization inside of McCormick School to basically centralize and coordinate the top drawer professional master's programs that McCormick School of Engineering has been known for more than 45 years. So the oldest program happens to be the MEM program, which goes back more than 45 years. Before introducing the panel moderator, I do want to thank the OPE staff who made this all possible. This event this evening tonight was long in the works. Thank you to Kim Kiris. Thank you to Casey Russell. Thank you for all the work you've done in making this possible. And some housekeeping items before we do the introductions here. Our panel session will start at roughly 7:25. Actually, no, the panel session will run until 7:25. And then we will have a breakout session with industry. So starting around 7:30 on a separate link, Northwestern students and alum will be networking with industry professionals. Industries will have separate rooms, all established, and we'll have some instructions for how to do that at the end of the panel session tonight. We do want to ask you to keep your mics muted. I do want to remind people that tonight's event is being recorded. We will likely use this in future marketing segments online, probably on our YouTube channels. And I also want to ask that questions be limited to the chat room. So please use your chat to ask questions. I know at some point, Julian and his panel will have a chance to answer them for you. But please, let's keep them to the chat room. With that, I would like to introduce Julian Cheng. He's the founder of GenOne Capital Investing, an early stage technology founder and startup. He has managed several financial and institutional VC funds, totaling $175 million of committed capital in more than 70 startups in areas such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, computer vision, space, autonomous vehicles, genomic sequencing, health tech, fintech, insurance, and others. Many of his investments from his funds have generated tremendous business, social, technology, and investor value, with several startups becoming acquired or IPO'd, including several 300 million, 500 million plus acquisitions. His IPO at 3.2 billion plus market cap. Julian is passionate about supporting and mentoring founders to build world-changing businesses, making an economic impact on the community, building founders' character and positive corporate culture while producing outsized returns. Before becoming a venture capital investor, Julian managed and developed software and hardware for enterprises, microprocessors, and satellites, and co-founded 2 startups in the IoT and education spaces. After working at large tech companies and startups in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Austin, he returned to Chicago to help invest in and cultivate the local technical and entrepreneurial ecosystem in hopes to transform this community. Julian holds a BS and EE from the University of Illinois at Champaign, studied engineering management at Stanford and Northwestern, where he obtained his master's in engineering management. So that's the connection to this event and to the OPE. He later obtained his MBA at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. I do want to turn it over to Julian at this point and let him introduce his panel and go through his presentation. And with that, I want to thank all of you. And thank you, Julian, for putting this night together for us.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for your leadership at Northwestern. You're definitely one of the reasons that I'm so successful today. I really appreciate everybody at Northwestern, both the faculty, staff, all the professors, both here and the other schools that I've been associated with. So I'll just tell you a little bit about GenOne Capital before we go into the panel. So we're actively investors in early stage technology companies. We're focusing on the future of health, work, education, computing, and connectivity. So we're supporting these trailblazers and visionaries that are really going to push humanity forward. I like to say that we invest in the 4 Ps, the people, products, process, and performance. So we are using some of the new technologies out there in order to disrupt those prior areas or sectors. So artificial intelligence, robotics as a service, quantum computing, edge computing, sensors, health tech, data science, and autonomous vehicles. We believe that the future of computing is the intersection of artificial intelligence, off-the-shelf hardware, software, sensors, internet, and the ability to interact with the physical world. And you're going to hear from 4 outstanding executives from startup companies that are going to talk a little bit about what they're doing. So one of the things I also really love to do with our venture firm is we educate some career explorers, MBAs, PhDs, college students, and high school students in order to encourage the next generation of diverse investors and entrepreneurs. And so these are a couple of the students that are on, some from Northwestern, both undergrad as well as grad students, as well as from other neighboring universities. So really excited to have you folks on as well. So we're going to talk about investing in connectivity, computing, and mobility under this global pandemic. So McKinsey and Company put together 2 recent white papers on this. They're saying that digitization and automation technologies have accelerated under COVID. There's going to be a faster adoption of automation and AI, as well as companies are looking to invest in areas or increase roles in health and hygiene. And some of the folks on the call are going to talk about that as well. So I want to introduce my distinguished panelists. We have a really outstanding group of individuals here, and everywhere from seed stage to later stage startups to recently IPO'd. So Maggie Jim is the head of finance and strategy for Zipline International. Zipline designs, manufactures, and operates drones that deliver critical medical supplies. She joined the company when it was just about 30 people. She's worn many hats, including producing the video that you'll see later, and she'll talk a little bit more about her role there. And then Maggie graduated from Northwestern in 2016 with a double major in learning and organization change, as well as economics, with a minor in business. And prior to Zipline, she worked for 6 years at Oliver Wyman Management Consulting. Harrison Shih is the director of Doordash Labs. Doordash, as many of you know, is a food delivery and logistics company, but it's interesting what Harrison is actually doing and investing in. So he graduated from Northwestern in 2010 with a degree in mathematical methods and social science and economics with a certificate in financial economics from Kellogg. Harrison has been an active leader, investor, and advisor in the tech industry for the last 10 years, specializing in product market fit for disruptive technologies. Among his notable roles include launching some of Google's fastest growing products, which gained 100 million users in 100 days, and leading multiple startups through successful exits, 2 acquisitions, and 2 public offerings. Harrison currently serves as an executive at Doordash, where he has started and heads the Stealth Advanced Technologies Group with a focus on the application of autonomous robots and its impact on local economies. We also have today Aaron Edzinger Gonzalez. He's the co-founder and CEO of Hello Robot. Aaron has a passion for building robots and robotic companies. He has founded 4 companies focused on commercializing human collaborative robots, and we'll talk about what those are. You'll hear the word cobots as well. 2 of those companies, Mika and Redwood Robotics, were acquired by Google in 2013, where then he went on to become the director of robotics at Google. In his role at Google, Aaron led the business, product, and technical development of 2 of Google's central investments in robotics. Aaron received his PhD from MIT in computer science and artificial intelligence in 2007. And then he left, he also left Google and founded Hello Robot with Charlie Kemp. So Charlie is the co-founder and CTO of Hello Robot. He's a recognized expert on mobile manipulation. In 2007, he founded the Healthcare Robotics Lab at Georgia Tech, where he's an associate professor in the Department of Biomedical Engineering. His lab conducted extensive research on mobile manipulators in order to assist older adults and people with disabilities. So Charlie has a bachelor's in mechanical engineering and a PhD from MIT, and he and Aaron first met while conducting research at the MIT Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab. So I'm going to turn it over to Maggie, Harrison, Aaron, and Charlie. We're just going to ask them a couple questions. I'd love to just go around and kind of hear everybody's origin stories about how they got to where they are today. And we'll start with Maggie. Maggie, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Nice to meet everyone.
Great. So Maggie, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what influenced, you going to Zipline and, how maybe your Northwestern experience helped you to get there?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I always feel like I have this like never-ending undecided major. But when I started when I graduated from Northwestern, I graduated, economics and learning and organizational change like major, and thought that I was going to go into consulting to like figure out what I want to do. Ended up being more of a generalist in consulting as well. And it was a great experience. I did a ton of strategy work, ultimately did a lot of implementation work as well. And frankly, felt like, even though I think typically people don't think about the implementation work to be like the sexy work in consulting, it ended up being the kind of things that actually would keep me up at night, because you're actually implementing real change. You're like redrawing the org, you're redesigning processes. And that brought me to when I started at Zipline, I was on the operations team. I thought I, wanted to try to figure out how to like build things from scratch and implement them in organizations. And yeah, and slowly grew from there, and ended up, as Julian mentioned, just wearing many hats, from like marketing to communications to fundraising, to doing the last couple rounds for Zipline, and focusing a lot on maybe wearing my strategy consultant role, like how to get to a sustainable business model and get on a path to profitability for a startup like ours. You've all probably heard like hardware is really hard. It is really hard. And it took a lot of work to figure it out. And I'm glad to be at a point where we're operating in multiple countries, serving millions of people. But it's really only a start. So excited to share with all of you.
Thank you, Maggie. And Harrison, can you share a little bit about your origin story, how you got to where you're at, some of your education experiences and mentors that may have helped you become successful?
For sure. Yeah, so I started at Northwestern. As Julian said, I studied economics and mathematics. I actually went there to go into academia, as I'm sure a lot of people in MSS do, if you guys are familiar with that major. But my whole goal was to explore and understand kind of paradigm shifts. I was obsessed with like A Beautiful Mind, that movie, and the idea that you could rethink the way that people interact or economic systems can interact. So while I was at school, though, I got allured by my first investment banking internship, as I'm sure is also fairly common for Northwestern students that you can kind of relate with. And so I got pulled into thinking about the business impact I could make. And so I was kind of on that path, and then Maggie was, a good friend of mine there. And then I think it's a little bit less common now, but at the time, really the only paths for really successful students was consulting and investment banking. And that was the path I was on. But I got kind of lucky on this unique opportunity to join Google as in this kind of elite program that they had, where I got to launch some really fun products and learn a lot about the tech world. I didn't know what a product manager was, or what product market fit was prior. But getting into that world, I got pretty obsessed with technology and startups. And so I've been all over the place helping to move businesses into what I call product market fit, and to hit profitability and commercial exits. And that took me through social gaming, to inventing a type of fitness app, all the way to my most recent stint in autonomous robotics, where my last company sold to Caterpillar, and changing the way that autonomy can be applied to kind of traditional technologies. companies. And so today I'm doing something similar. As Julian said, I lead a stealth initiative that I founded about 3 years ago, looking at advanced technologies for a company like Doordash. I'll try to share as much as I can during this, but to answer the question of kind of the inspiration, I think Northwestern was a huge part of what made all of this possible for me. I gained a lot while I was there, especially the business acumen that has allowed me to be successful in such a high-tech world. I didn't study engineering or computer science, but I think a lot of the knowledge that I learned from just the courses at Kellogg, through getting to run a startup, through Northwestern Student Holdings, even ISB, where I was, vice president to Maggie's president there, really helped me be successful and be able to lead businesses at a very young age, and know how to work with really smart people through MMSS. Again, I hope there's some MMSS majors out there, but I think you would know that unless you're very collaborative with those that are smarter than you in the courses, you're probably not passing. So it's very similar to the startup world, where it's really difficult to succeed unless you latch on to those that are smarter and more capable than you in a lot of ways, and you contribute what you can while you take from them what they can. Yeah.
Thank you, Harrison. And Aaron, would you like to share a little bit about your origin story and personal journey to how you got to where you are today?
Sure. And thank you, Julian, for having us and inviting Hello Robot to join today. Let's see. So I've been in robotics for, I guess, over 20 years. And to be honest, I've had a kind of a bit of a different path, and I never planned on being an entrepreneur. At one point, I thought I'd be an artist, and I worked very hard at that, and I ended up here today. So, a little bit on the just kind of the backstory to my origin story. My family, both sides come from kind of manual labor. My mom's family used to actually work in the orchards, picking fruit where Google is now located, right? And my father similarly. And so labor was always kind of part of the family. And I grew up on a farm, and was always interested in efficiency and automation because of that. Because to be honest, manual labor was just no fun when you're a 12-year-old kid. And so I kind of had a bent for building things and figuring out ways that make things more efficient. Got interested in sort of mechanical things by working on a farm, and then kind of went off on a different tangent for a while and did art, right? And went through Stanford, but really was pursuing art. And at some point, the two things intersected, this passion for building and creating mechanical things, efficiencies, and this interest in creativity and human interaction and how people interact with this type of technology really started to pique my interest. So I applied to MIT and got very lucky. I found an important mentor in Rodney Brooks. He was a professor there, and it's where I met Charlie, my co-founder. Rod was and probably still is a preeminent kind of roboticist in terms of the impact he's had in the world within robotics. And part of that being at MIT and being in the lab with someone of such stature is you develop a model of success, right? You can look at them and say, oh, this is what it means to be in a technical meeting. This is what it means to be in a room full of 20 Japanese businessmen who are pitching you, right? You get these models of success. And at the time, he also had started iRobot and had just IPO'd with the Roomba. And that was another model of success. And so when I left MIT, he encouraged me to start a company. There weren't really any real robotic startups at the time to speak of. I mean, there were very few. But I had to kind of invent my own way. And most people cautioned me to not build a hardware company of all things in robotics, because there's just there's no example and no model for success there. But Charlie ended up being my first customer for the company I started at Mecca. And 6 years, hard years later of toil and bootstrapping, we got acquired by Google. And also along the way, I started another company, a collaborative robot, industrial robot arm company. So I found myself at Google, working in the same place where my grandfather used to pick apricots as a director of robotics there. And it was a great learning experience, again, to see a model of success and also a model of how a large corporate research effort can, with lots and lots of resources, what they can accomplish, and how actually as a startup you can do other things in a more agile and more interesting way often. And so despite being a really fantastic place to work, I left after 3.5 years, joined forces with Charlie, and we started Hello Robot. And so we'll hear a little more about that later.
Thank you, Aaron. And Charlie, would you like to go next? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your origin story.
Yeah, happy to do it. So Julian, prepped me and asked for an origin story. So I'm going way back, and I prepared it a bit. So long ago, while growing up in Dallas, Texas, I got involved with personal computing. It was revolution at the time, and my parents had encouraged me because they recognized that something important was happening. Personal computers didn't just deliver content like a television; they were these tools for creation. And later on, when I applied to MIT, I wasn't an obvious choice. I was coming from a large public high school, but in my application, I included a floppy disk with this 3D game I programmed where the player, it's first person, player tries to get into a university. And I was surprised, I actually got into MIT. And it turned out my early immersion in this revolution of personal computing had really paid off. Besides learning to program, two early formative experiences that really stand out for me, or that one, my parents encouraged an entrepreneurial mindset. For example, like 6th grader, I sold Charlie's Draw program at an Apple user group meetings, and I saw these amazing communities of creation around this first computer. The first computer was an Apple, and then. My parents also encouraged an investing mindset. And over time, I gained this appreciation for frugality and exponential growth and having a diversified portfolio of investments. So, once I ended up at MIT as an undergraduate, my entrepreneurial ambitions completely changed because I got captivated by artificial intelligence and robotics. They really got my imagination going. And I ended up staying at MIT a lot longer than I planned until I actually earned a PhD. And then left for academia. I was in Georgia Tech. I became a faculty member there, founded Healthcare Robotics Lab. And it wasn't a traditional business, but my entrepreneurial and investing mindsets really played important roles because they helped me create a productive organization with a quality intellectual product, to invest wisely in a portfolio of research that's diversified, and also to achieve personal financial independence with academic pay, which gave me freedom later on to do what I wanted to do. So my lab was a success. I was comfortable, very comfortable in my tenured position. And through our research, we had seen this bright future for personal robotics, including seeing people with disabilities, including older adults who were really ready for the technology. But it was frustrating because after a decade of research, I just wasn't seeing the real world progress. I was seeing lots of people being helped in a lab. So out of that frustration, I reached out to Aaron, he's a successful robotics entrepreneur and a friend, and we co-founded Hello Robot. And in July, we started selling the personal robot Stretch, which is this powerful tool for creation, much like those tools for creation I worked with when I was a kid. My Hello Robot adventure, it's been thrilling, uncomfortable, and rewarding. I'm thankful for the entrepreneurial and investing mindsets my parents instilled, which helped make me take that leap into the unknown. There are no age limits for being an entrepreneur with emerging technologies. You could be an elementary school student or a tenured faculty. We need access to the tools for creation. And that's what Hello Robot is trying to provide.
Thank you, Charlie. And so these 4 executives at startup companies, Series E companies, as well as recently IPO, they give you a cross-section of different people, different phases of life. In my role as an EIR at Northwestern and as a executive in residence, as well as adjunct faculty, I'm going to be helping with students in terms of their startups and their ideas, as well as helping with faculty and staff get to know the entrepreneurship world and commercialize some of their innovation to hopefully create some outstanding startups as well. So now I'd like to go around and have the folks talk about their companies, what it does, and the impact of helping people through the pandemic, how you guys utilize technology to accomplish your goals. So let me go first to Hello Robots.
Great, and I guess Julian, you've got some slides. There we go. Okay, before we kind of jump into the slide deck, just in the context of the pandemic, first off, we launched this product in the middle of the pandemic, which was a little bit frightening. It turns out it's worked out well, in part because people are working from homes, and this is a robot you can actually ship in a cardboard box, get to your home, and work from home, much like a personal computer. It's a personal robot in a sense. So we've fared well, and we've also seen a lot of use cases coming towards us from the outside that are about the pandemic and how to better provide care in the pandemic. So let's go ahead to the next slide. So these are some photographs actually out of Charlie's lab at Georgia Tech, right? And sort of the background for Hello Robot and what we're doing is really about providing assistance to people, right? We believe in robots as a technology that can be a meaningful good in society. And mobile manipulators in particular, which are robots with arms, have an opportunity to help people that today maybe have some physical limitations, particularly people with disabilities and older adults. And so these photos showed some work in Charlie's lab of previous robots that have provided value to people feeding, shaving, medication taking. But these robots were large, expensive, and cumbersome, and they just weren't viable as a product in the world. And so when we started Hello Robot, we were really thinking with the mindset of how do we build something that can help in this context. And so next slide. And here's the video that gives a highlight of the product, and we'll come back and tell you a little more about what you saw. And that's my son Levi, and you can kind of see just the size and kind of for context. Okay, so that's the product stretch that we launched in July, and we call it the research edition because we really are targeting right now researchers, academic and corporate, who are looking to invent the future of robotics with mobile manipulation, right, and find the use cases and applications where this technology can be deployed. So the product itself, it's $18,000, which it's a lot if you're an individual consumer, but if you are a corporate R&D lab, if you're buying these types of robots, it's almost a factor of 10 less than anything that's out there. And one thing we really focused on was to make it compact, lightweight, safe to work around, right? And so this is kind of the difference between a laptop and a large desktop PC, right? It really changes the nature of the technology when it's more portable and it's easy to work with and deployable. And the other thing we're doing with this robot is right now we're all open source. So we're really trying to encourage a community of people to develop on it. And we're seeing actually really great traction, both from the corporate side and from the academic side, of people who are excited to find these applications and develop them. But as Hello Robot, we're being very mindful of where the technology is on the curve and its maturity with respect to sort of a consumer general purpose home device. So really right now we're targeting innovation groups within larger businesses or academic partners to help really invent the future with the technology. And next slide. So we've seen a lot of inbound interest, surprisingly from industry. We thought, and we're pretty confident we'd see a lot of excitement in the academic world. But what we're seeing is that there's a real interest around mobile cobots. And what a cobot is, it's a robot arm traditionally that's safe around a person. A person can be around it. It's easy to program. and they use it in manufacturing, e-commerce types of settings. But with mobility, when you give mobility to that arm, it changes the types of applications that you can do with the product. Types of things that we're seeing a lot of interest around in manufacturing, around inspection, around quality of product, in e-commerce, around shelf picking, in service industries, item delivery, in hospitals, UV disinfection. This is a place that a number of groups are interested in with Stretch in lieu of the pandemic. And finally, one thing to note is that the robot itself supports teleoperation and autonomy. And I think one thing that we're seeing is that you can do a lot through teleoperation, right? This is a person remotely controlling it through perhaps a web browser. And you also need some level of autonomous motion and planning done through its sensors. And that there's going to be for some time the mix between the two to really build out effective applications. So I think one more slide. And so finally, just to say again, we see ourselves as a company with purpose. We have a long-term vision about what we want this technology to achieve, to do good in society. Right now, we're really encouraging people to join us to kind of build a great community and go on the adventure with us. And so with that, I think Charlie might even have a live demo.
Yeah, if time permits, I'm happy to give a demo. What do you think, Julian?
Yeah, maybe for a minute or two, Charlie.
Yeah, sure. So when you get the robot and you unpack it, you turn it on and you pull out this Xbox style controller, and then you can start driving it around to do initial feasibility assessments. So if I move the joystick up, the arm goes up. I move the joystick down, the arm goes down. I go this way, it extends. I go this way, it retracts. And now I can also press Y, and then it's going to automatically stow the arm. And at that point, I can drive it over to myself, because I want you to see it next to me, because that's one of the key things of the Cobot. So now I'm driving it over here. It's just a two-wheeled base. And what I'll do is I'll see if I can do some manipulation here by the desk. So I'm moving the arm up. At this point, I'm going to, well, before I do this, I'll show you there it also it's designed for autonomy. So this is a 3D camera here. So you can look around the world. It has a good field of view. But one of the key things about this is manipulation, not just being able to drive it around. So see if I can give you an example of manipulation. And I'm also going to unplug it. Okay, so once you've got it driven, you can go and move the gripper out. And now it's pretty easy. It's just in, out, up, down, and then sideways. And so then I can try to pick up objects on my desk. So I'll see if I can get the water I've been drinking. Always a little nervous with the live demo, but here we go. Now at this point, you'll see, I've got it. And I could get my phone too. I did that earlier today. I didn't know if I could do it. Now, when this came out of assistive technology research for older adults and people with disabilities. So one of the keys is to be able to work around a person's body for those sorts of applications, which is this longer term ambition for our product. And so key is this custom lightweight carbon fiber arm that is force sensitive. So I try to drive it through my hand and it won't let me. Or if I try to pull it back into my hand, it's not going to let me. Same thing the other direction. So I feel very comfortable, much more so than any other robot like this, having it near my body where it could do useful things. Last thing I'll do, and then I'll hand it back to Julian here, is just, as Aaron mentioned, trying to have it so it's easy for an individual to work with. In my lab, robots like this have been $400,000 and 400 pounds. It's just, not reasonable. In fact, Keenan, one of the founders of Zipline, knows this well. So I can just pause it. And at that point, I can back drive it. I can extend the arm. I can move it up and down. And then, as an individual, it's just like a vacuum cleaner. I can move it, tilt it over, move it back here, and then you can see that even though it's not humanoid, it's got a human-like reach. And the shoulder is pretty high, so it can work on these high countertops. Last thing, which is something that people don't usually realize, most robots can't do something as simple as reaching down on the ground, which, when people with disabilities drop objects, they want a robot to pick something up for them. Well, this robot can reach the ground. It has a big workspace. So it just really changes the game. It's got all sorts of other things. It's very much designed for being extensible, adding USB and adding different end effectors. It's easy to work with. It's all open source. It's just got a computer inside, so you can just attach a monitor. Really ideal for development. So we're excited. Comes calibrated too. That's a subtle point, but hey, it's something I appreciated. Julian, I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie. And let's now turn it over to Maggie. Maggie, let me know when you could see my screen. If you could tell us about Zipline.
Sure. I was just gonna say, Charlie, I can't wait till I can administer a vaccine. That would be awesome.
That would be cool.
So a little bit about Zipline. Yeah, so, the challenge that we saw was that billions of people around the world lack access to basic medical supplies, and 5 million kids die every year because of it. We don't want to pretend that it's okay or normal. And so at Zipline, we design, manufacture, and operate a drone-based instant delivery system. And our mission is to provide all humans with equal access to vital medical supplies. Today, we serve 25 million people across Rwanda, Ghana, and the US, and deliver over 150 different medical products to 2,500 health facilities across the countries. In Rwanda now, for example, we are responsible for over 70% of the blood supply outside of the capital city of Kigali. And over 50% of the blood that we deliver goes to mom with postpartum hemorrhaging and children with anemic due to malaria. And so, yeah, we launched in 2016 with just blood. And prior to that, basically a health worker would have to jump into a truck, drive across town, which would take hours round trip to go pick up blood because it's not available, because it's the wrong type, because they don't have all the access to the different components, because it's really hard to store everything. Some things are frozen, some things are at room temperature, but they need to be agitated at all times. And it's just really hard to always have perfect match between what blood group a certain patient is versus what is available at a facility. So at the very least, people would jump into a car, or patients get referred all the time, which you can imagine in those emergency life and death situation. It's uncomfortable. There's a lot of risks. And so we design the technology where we can centralize all of the blood at our distribution center and be able to reach all of the hospitals, the rural hospitals across the country from 2 of our distribution centers. So that's where we started. And then we were able to then sign a new contract with Ministry of Health in Ghana and launch a very similar service in Ghana and actually ramp up last year. So now that's how we got to the 2,500 health facilities across the 2 countries. And last year was very interesting. When COVID hit, we were kind of like a lot of other startups, just unsure. And a lot of our activities was international at the time. So we were all sort of just locked down in our house here in the US. And it really empowered our team members abroad to go launch new operations as well, totally on their own. And at the same time, when countries were able to then shift from emergency response to really focusing on how to build a resilient healthcare infrastructure, that's when it became super obvious why, of course, you would build an automated logistics system, why you would want to build, deliver things to people in a contactless way. And, even a lot of the sort of evolution that we were hoping to see over a decade, like telemedicine, all of a sudden it became super relevant and like regulations changed to accommodate a lot of those things. And that included the US. And so last year we launched in the US, and we have a distribution center in North Carolina that launched under temporary approval for emergency. And we've been delivering PPEs to hospitals for a regional health system in North Carolina. And yeah, we're hoping to continue to grow internationally in Africa, maybe a new continent, and we're also hoping to grow in the US as well this year. And hopefully, support a lot of the COVAX distribution work that is very well needed, especially in rural areas.
Cool. Thank you, Maggie. Let me show them the video that you helped create and tell the story.
Zipline is divided into different teams. We have the flight ops who care about pre-flighting planes, packing, loading the packages, and make sure that plane can fly. And then we have health ops. You can include more of the people with the knowledge of the blood product.
We make order to Zipline by using SMS or by using WhatsApp.
The package is handed to flight ops. You scan the package, and that's when we put the vehicle on the launcher. The vehicle will fly autonomously up to the hospital.
Iyo nabona ayo maraso nari gushobora gupfa. Igihe kuva basaba amaraso n'igihe yatugereyeho nta minota 5 irimo.
Nabona amaraso kumva naritabye Imana. Ko ari yagize umuntu.
We can avoid expiries, we can avoid stockout because the supply chain has improved. Blood is life. It is saving life for Rwandans.
Great. And so what was interesting is you were able to scale it nationally and also across many different countries in Africa. But then also what was interesting is you're taking that learning and then also applying it here, right, in America?
Yeah.
I'll play the video.
Yeah, I think it's not obvious that Walmart is like one of the largest like healthcare like insurance provider in the U.S. Because of the amount of employees that they employ, and they also deliver health and wellness products, and they have prescriptions that they deliver as well. And so we're excited to partner with them alongside with a couple other U.S. hospital systems that we're already working with to launch the service in the U.S. I think a lot of times like the challenges that I just described, people think, oh yeah, like that is a challenge in emerging economies or like super rural areas. The US face a lot of the same challenges. We have one of the worst like postpartum hemorrhaging and maternal health care in developed countries. So it's definitely not a Rwanda problem or an Africa problem. And so we're excited to, basically continue our journey to bring care closer and closer to home, and hopefully reaching over 85% of the US homes within the next few years. And yeah, one of the things that we're really excited to show and hopefully demonstrate, like our vision is that logistics system would work around you and not the other way around, that you can basically set a delivery like an alarm on your phone. Like if you want something delivered at 9:30, it's going to come at 9:30. It's not going to come at 10. It's not going to come at 1 p.m. instead. That you don't have to like be bound and like work your work schedule and everything tied to when you're going to receive the package, especially if it's like for a lot of chronic patients that are just waiting around for their medications. So yeah, we're excited to sort of solve this problem globally.
That's great. Thank you so much, Maggie. And for all you engineers out there, I would go onto YouTube, look at some of, Google Fly Zipline, and look at some of the engineering technologies that are behind that. So they've got centimeter accuracy, they adjust for the wind. They've got a lot of multiple redundancies to make sure that it's safe. So it's pretty amazing. And so now I want to turn it over to Harrison. Harrison, would love for you to talk about Doordash as well as Doordash Labs.
Cool. Yeah. I can share a bit. So we're on the other side of what Aaron, Charlie, and Maggie talked about. We're a logistics provider, and so most of you guys know us as probably a food delivery provider from your favorite local restaurants. But really, our goal is just to empower local businesses in general, and we have a lot of different product lines that do that. And so, if you want to play the video. Many of you, if you watched the Super Bowl, saw our ad, but this encompasses a lot of what our actual focus is around neighborhoods. But I thought this was fun.
Oh, you got a delivery, David.
Yeah, Big Bird. You can get all sorts of things delivered from the neighborhood.
The neighborhood?
All from the people in your neighborhood. The people that you meet when you're walking down the street. They're the master chef, the burger flipper, the corner store owner bagging low-fat milk with gum and pink shampoo. They're the culinary artists with delicious cuisines.
That famous cookie shop in the magazine. All that?
Well, you can also get empanadas down the street.
Mango smoothie, sweet and tart.
From the big shops to the mom and pops, they can bring it to me a la carte.
Hey! They're the people that you meet each day.
Get more from your neighborhood, from convenience to corner stores. Doordash.
I'm all right.
And for every order, we'll donate $1 to Sesame Workshop.
So, as the pandemic hit earlier last year, we saw our business really become a focal point of what a lot of local communities and governments were talking about. But it really magnified our vision, which is that local businesses are really vulnerable today. And it really magnified how important it is to bring technology and digitization to these mom and pop shops and your favorite restaurant, your grocery stores, your local services even. And so we really turned our attention to seeing how we could bolster this community. And in that, we gave more than $100 million in relief to help local businesses stay afloat. Those businesses that decided to partner with us, and that number was, we set records with how many restaurants and other local businesses signed up with us, were 6 times more likely to survive during this period of the pandemic. And of those, 2/3 saw increased profitability when working with us versus those that didn't work with us. And so what we're really proud of is that we were able to bring what was our disruptive technology. We're a 7-year-old company. We're very young and still figuring things out, but have really found a niche. And what Maggie said too, the pandemic has really just accelerated a lot of our roadmap. We're operating in a 2023, 2024 world. We thought it would take a lot more time to educate people about why they need local commerce, but now everyone understands the need for delivery and the need for connection to their community, especially when you have to be distanced. And so I want to talk about a couple of our initiatives that some of you may not know about. The first of which is Project Dash. Project Dash is our social impact arm that empowers local community organizations to connect better with the communities that they serve. So for the most part, what we were doing before is bringing surplus food over to communities in need and delivered millions of meals. But with the onset of COVID, we expanded those services to just help with all kinds of deliveries, including school meals for low-income families. Those had to get to the students somehow, and we stepped up in a major way across 800 cities. And so the impact has been fairly incredible. We've done more than 9 million meal deliveries, 6.5 million of which have happened in the last year, just during this pandemic. And like I said, the reach has been really international across the US and Canada. And so this initiative is one that we're constantly investing in and seeing how important it is. And none of this would be possible without the technology that we enable to allow this kind of logistics. The other initiative, which is probably my favorite at Doordash, is called Kitchens Without Borders. And you can play this video, which is our little teaser for this initiative. Just the next slide.
When I cook my food, I do with passion, with love.
A lot of people who are different ethnicities bring their families and their guests.
Let's do something that I like all my life. I like cooking.
How can I give so I can make a difference in someone's life? That's what counts.
And so this initiative highlights our immigrant and refugee small business entrepreneurs that have come here and created some of our favorite foods. We highlight some awesome Chicago establishments too, like Wu's Chinese Cuisine. You guys should go check it out at kitchenswithoutborders.com. But I guess the point here is that there's humans behind everything that we do. And while we are a technology company that provides logistics, at the heart of it, there's really no reason to do any of these things if it weren't for the people that we're helping to give access to and bring kind of business success to. And something our company takes really seriously is the diversity and equity that we can provide. I think our S1 is one of my favorites that I've read for a number of reasons. But if you guys read the opening letter, Tony Xu, our CEO, himself was an immigrant here. And he talks in the S1 in his opening letter about how difficult it was that his mom, who was a highly educated doctor, had to start over with him to create opportunity so that he could ultimately go off, learn the industry and start Doordash. And this is something that I find really important, is that, as we think about using technology and growing businesses, that not everyone has these opportunities and what we can do once we get there to help. So I think talking about the technology we use, the one thing I can talk about is our recent announcement of our acquisition of Chobotics a few weeks ago. So we bought this company that does kind of automated bowl prep. We can watch some of the video at least. So I'll talk through it, but this is a robot that is on a lot of university campuses, a lot of hospitals, places that need 24-hour access to food, but labor can be a little difficult. And so we can have fresh ingredients in there, and now you can make a bowl at any time, and perfectly fresh, customized to you based on your allergies or your preferences, not just prepackaged meals. These are fresh made salads, bowls, lentils, whatever you like in a bowl. And so this is a technology, again, that we're bringing to help maximize the reach and the capabilities of our merchants. Yeah, so here's some examples of what we do. I think the thing I'll end with is, I'm really close with Maggie, Aaron, and Charlie, and the awesome technology that they're building. It's something that we're constantly on the lookout for. There's not the Doordash lot does. Yeah, so my group is constantly in search of new technologies and different ways that we can give empowerment to local businesses, whether it's awesome robots or it's drones or it's self-driving cars or food making robots. And so I think there's a lot of awesome entrepreneurs out there. If you guys have new, interesting technologies, I'd love to hear about them.
Great, thank you so much, Harrison, Maggie, Aaron, and Charlie. In a couple minutes, we're going to break and have the students, current Northwestern students, grad students, alumni of Northwestern. We're going to publish a link for you to break off and go to meet with some of the industry folks. And we invite everybody else to stay here and engage with Maggie, Harrison, Charlie, and Aaron. And I just want to thank everybody for joining. Thank you for our distinguished panel talking about where they're investing in terms of the future of autonomy, mobility, and computing, how they're making an impact on health, food, delivery, and logistics, and just sharing some of the wisdom that they've gone through from Northwestern and other schools. So I don't know, you could go off mute, you could say thank you to them, or just do an air clap or something. So it's really exciting. Thank you all for this opportunity to come and meet with you. And I'll turn it over to Mark. And
yes, I'm here. Thank you, Julian. Thank you to all of our panelists. Great talks, great content. As a former robotics engineer, I could relate to a lot of what Aaron was talking about, as well as Charlie. I've already posted a link to our industry event, our networking event. So if you want to meet with industry partners, please use that link. You can basically ask them questions, listen to what types of people they're hiring, and what types of folks they're looking for. So again, that's open to Northwestern current day students at the grad level, as well as alum. So feel free to use that link. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a note by chat. I did fail to mention that Julian is our entrepreneur in residence this year. What that means is he's basically donating his time and energy to work with us to bring content like this to our audiences, as well as additional seminars and webinars in the future. And he will be teaching a class for us in entrepreneurship at the grad level starting this summer. So it's great to have Julian. It's great to have all those great panelists. I'm going to give people a few moments to migrate over. I think we've already seen about 20, 30 folks use that link. So feel free to move over to that industry networking session that starts in just a few moments. I'll be glad to post it again if anyone missed it, because I think we've had a lot of messages since then. I do want to thank, again, all the panelists, especially Maggie with the Zipline discussion. I've taught Zipline before. I never had anyone from Zipline actually discuss it face-to-face like that. So that was just totally amazing. I had no idea what was happening here in the States. And then Harrison, of course, with Doordash, an amazing company bringing a very necessary service. What people are now starting to discuss is almost an essential utility. So thank you all. I think we're down to about 40, 45 participants in this session with you, Julian. I'll let you take it back from here. Again, if anyone wants to participate in the industry networking session, the link is posted on the chat box. Because I know that it seems like in many ways it's more relevant now than ever, but I also, the flip side is what happens when COVID goes away. So maybe two questions there.
I'm happy to start. Yeah, I mean, most of our information is fairly public knowledge, and if it's not, I'm not allowed to talk about it. But the COVID has been really impactful to our business, especially with food delivery, but also we've launched a bunch of other initiatives like convenience, and where Maggie talked about a partnership with Walmart. We're one of Walmart's biggest delivery partners as well. People want their groceries delivered, people want their food delivered, and there's a huge question that everyone has on what does a post-pandemic world look like. And I can't really forecast that for anyone, but I can say that from a general standpoint, right, it does seem like we've trained new behaviors and given people access to services and convenience that maybe they didn't realize was an option to them. And so there are parts of COVID that will go away, hopefully. I think there is discussion of whether this is the last pandemic we'll see in a kind of a near term, but also, but I do think that while some of those things will go away, like we won't always have to be 6 feet apart or wear masks next to each other or not leave our houses or work from home forever. While those things will change, I think the idea that you can support your local business and still have the convenience of the e-commerce giants that maybe you're used to, that seems like something that can stay around. We're hopeful of that, and it's something we've seen in some of our numbers as well.
Hi,
Good.
Hi, Julian. I'm one of the advisors to the students. I have a question for the whole panel, all 5 of you. Most of the entrepreneurs have always relied on elevator speeches, very short presentations, but always in person to investors. And investors always have had trouble finding good opportunities. Has that landscape adapted to the not in-person connection, and have investors reached out to any of you proactively to see whether they can get on board with your enterprise?
That's an interesting question. I think for Zipline, there's always an element of like, you got to see it to believe it. I mean, like if we were just telling an investor that, you know, we have a fleet of drones that's like delivering medical supplies in the middle of Rwanda and Ghana, that was always a little bit of a hard story for us to tell. I mean, until we were launching the US this year. So I think what actually was helpful was that we were able to very naturally ask a lot of them to do a video tour of our distribution centers in Rwanda and Ghana and just like watch operations live. I think in that sense, it's helped us a lot because we don't necessarily have a lot I mean, we have the manufacturing here in the US, but it does sort of enable the more like virtual tour and make it be a part of your presentation instead of just doing a, you know, pure presentation.
And I will say, Maggie, your company has some of the best investors. So in Andreessen Horowitz, Sequoia, and there's one more that I'm forgetting. What's the third?
Well, there are many. I'm not going to pick my favorites here, but we've been lucky to have some pretty patient investors that's been with us. I mean, it's been 10 years, so I'm not going to pretend it's been like an easy investment for them to like stick with. So,
sort of combining answers to a couple of questions, but one I'd say, you know, for us, there have been situations where we've probably relied on kind of our circle of trust more. The introduction from someone who we really trust, has had additional weight, and we've required it more maybe than we would have in the past, where we could have really met people in person. But at the same time, I think it's nice because it has lowered what people think is required to reach an agreement. You know, we have partners in New Zealand and we're shipping them a robot and we've got an MOU and we're excited about what we're doing, and we haven't met them in person, but you know, there's enough evidence, and we've had enough meetings that we feel comfortable with it. And I'm frankly glad they didn't have to fly in from New Zealand and that we didn't have to fly there. I think it results in more efficient business transactions. You know, similarly, you know, when we started, we were a little uncomfortable because we started out as a East Coast, West Coast entity. I'm in Atlanta with the team here. Aaron's in Bay Area with the team there. And before COVID, we felt a little odd about it. And, you know, we always were kind of expecting to get a little bit of a negative response when we brought that up to people. And now, you know, it ended up being fortuitous because we already had practices in place. We were used to operating in this manner. And now it just seemed like there's nothing unusual about it at all. I think that's fortunate. And I'm sure it's just a sign of things to come. The ease with which, even in a hardware-centric company, one can do things remotely. We have a new team member and he's in Atlanta. I haven't seen him in a year, but he has one of our robots and we meet once a week and very productive. The world has changed.
I really appreciate all of you taking the time. I learned a lot, and hopefully the rest of the audience also gained a lot from this presentation of all of you, because it is a diverse group, diverse industries, yet all driven by technology and entrepreneurs. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This has been a great event.
Thanks, Will.
I see a question from AJ Dave.
Hi, I think William actually had a question in the chat before I raised my hand.
Oh, okay. Got it. All right. Are there any other questions while they're all in a group? Otherwise, we'll go to the breakout rooms. We've got 3 breakout rooms set up for each of the 3 companies represented here, and the 4th can stay here with GenOne if people want to stick around with GenOne.
Yeah, Matt, you had a question first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. My question was about like I'm coming from a robotics engineering perspective, and I'm wondering about if there is any tension between like following that cool technology versus satisfying the business needs. So Maggie was talking about how if they could invent a teleportation machine, you would do it. So I was wondering if Zipline came about from saying we're going to use drones to launch drones on catapults and do these cool things, or if you actually came to that by you know, we want to transport things and drones is how we're, and you know, how did that work? And I'm just wondering in general about the tension, if there is a tension between that and
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, lots of reasons and iterations, and, you know, we landed on like drone being the easiest way to basically like leapfrog like existing infrastructure. Like it's a lot easier to fly in the air than to try to like navigate ground robot. Our whole focus was to design the most simple solution so that we can solve the problem as quickly as possible. Like it's not that like like automated ground robot would be like the wrong way to do it. It would just take a whole lot more time. And then we always get the question, for example, like, oh, why is your, you know, it's interesting. Zipline is the only one with a fixed wing design. Well, because it is the simplest, it would be a lot cheaper than flying something that's like, you know, multi-copter with a lot of motors. It's a lot easier from a safety standpoint. Like we don't land on the other side when we deliver. We don't have to worry about putting, you know, equipment there or how close it might get to people. Just very simple box with a paper parachute, and it drops, and it's great. Like they have what they need, and as long as the drone can fly safely, efficiently back to the distribution center. It was through a lot of those things to be like, what can we not do in order to ship the product and see if it works? That was everything. You know, Charlie mentioned Keenan. That's like Keenan's whole philosophy, just like get it out the door, because you've probably designed the wrong thing. So until you're actually serving customers, you don't really know if you're solving the problem or not. So yeah, I think it is a series of decisions that, you know, kind of got to, you know, what our product is today. Yeah, you know, it's not like it's totally different from the first concept, but, you know, I don't think we would have imagined the same thing if we just, you know, drew it in the back of a napkin.
Yeah, and it's something we talk about constantly, and we love talking to robotics engineers, and you know we're hiring too if anyone is interested. But so I would say that's probably the thing that we debate the most, because we see a lot of companies out there that we get pitched you know, weekly by the next hot startup that has some world-changing technology they want to show us. And we kind of say the same thing every time, which is that we don't really care about the technology. Maggie said it really, really well, right? You know, a lot of people want to work on really sexy, really cool things. And that may be really fun to do, but it's not super relevant to a company like us. And I think the other companies that aren't like us probably feel the same way, which is we have a problem. And if you can help us solve it, then awesome. And we'll take your technology, we'll use it. But if you can show us an awesome demo that wows all of us, that gets you almost nowhere, right? Can you get food there faster, warmer, more accurately? Can you help us sort our inventory better? Can you help our merchant partners manage their forecasts and predictability better? Do you have AI that does something? What's your use case? And we're an incredibly KPI and OKR driven team. And I think that is something that a lot of robotics companies actually lack. They don't look at OKRs and KPIs. They look at maybe internally consistent KPIs like your IOUs or your precision and accuracy numbers, but not how many obstacles that means you don't hit, or how much faster you're able to go. and how much dasher efficiency you're able to increase, right? So I think it's really fun to think about the kind of technical performance metrics, but I think if you want commercialization, like outside of research, then you have to start with the problem, not the solution.
So yeah, I have a slightly different take for, at least for us. If you look at the dawn of industrial robot arms, I mean, there are these general purpose devices that could be used in all sorts of contexts. And over time, people have figured out how to apply them in industrial automation and have been hugely successful. But it's a chicken and the egg thing, because if you don't have the technology, you can't really discover where the technology can best be applied. And if you don't understand where things can best be applied, you can't develop the technology. The only way you break a chicken and egg problem like that is through iteration. And that's really been our approach. We get something out there. It's related to what Maggie was saying, get something out there that customers can work with so that they can easily explore and find out, where is this going to create the best value? Where does it make sense? Where is it better than a drone? Where is it better than a fixed arm? Because there is definitely a space for it. I know that for sure. And I know one application area, which is assistive technology. There's no doubt about it. There are just some things where a versatile technology like this that can reach all around your body, hold things for you, pick things up for you, help you with self-care. It's just hugely valuable, and there's not really an alternative except having a human assistant. But that's just one use case, and that's not going to be the most immediately economically viable one. But what's been exciting is when we put it out there as this prospect, as this product to help people explore, we've just seen interest that we just never imagined. And that's what I love about the notion of creating this. It's a tool for creation. It's a tool to help people discover the opportunities and to bring people in and to create a community around it. I mean, it's the same sort of thing you did see with the personal computer revolution. The Apple, it's said a lot, but what was the Apple about? Was it like solving a specific problem? Well, it was more of this versatile device that could do lots of interesting things and was compelling enough to bring a lot of people on board to find that value together. And that's really what we want to do. But it's tricky. The tension, in robotics, there's this classic thing about a specialized, simple machine that does one thing versus a versatile machine that can do lots of things. It's not something where the solution is obvious, but I'm confident in the long term, we're finding really exciting things. Oh, one other, by the way, in terms of virtual stuff, something I'm so happy about, we're creating this community event, and we'd have to have so much money if we were going to fly a bunch of people or host at some place. We can just do it virtually for a lean startup. It's such a huge value. I think that's one example of where the cost of creating a community and bringing lots of people together like this is just going to dramatically go down, so that lean startups can actually play in that kind of space. Anyway.
All right, great. I think a couple of the panelists have to drop off, so let's just stay here, just also for simplicity's sake. Does anybody have another question they want to ask?
Thank you very much. Very nice presentation.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Jim. Let me ask some of the folks that are on what industries they're in, or what what potential use cases that they see. Like we've got Maggie on from like logistics and delivery. We've got Harrison as well. So one's aerial delivery, one is food delivery. We've got Charlie and Aaron on from a physical manipulation standpoint and robots working alongside humans. What are some use cases that you guys could see for your industries that you guys work in? So I know we've got a number of people from the healthcare space. What are some things that
this is Jim. I'm from
that you guys see? Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, from Baxter Healthcare. So we do a lot in the in-hospital space. So not sure exactly the applications. We also have 20,000 peritoneal dialysis patients in homes, all over the United States and then globally as well. They have to get their supplies by truck, But those are heavier products. So that's why I was interested in what the capacity might be in the future. And now in the future, there may be more concentrated supplies or different ways of doing it where we do point of care manufacturing basically, but you still have to ship some stuff, maybe lighter stuff. So I think in home healthcare, there's definitely opportunity because, because of the last mile problem and all that. So I guess encourage you to think about that. And maybe you already have, and as you know, COVID has really also expanded, opportunities for home healthcare. So.
One area that we've been excited about and we've looked at quite a bit is actually assisting remote caregiving. And it's not just nurses who often will have to get in the car and drive to someone's home to provide care, but it's also for family members that are in the support network that aren't geographically close. And, I think there's a real opportunity to actually just increase the availability of people to provide care for a loved one who's maybe older and just needs someone just to check in or open the door and make sure everything looks okay behind it, that type of thing. We're not going to provide real kind of hands-on care, and nor I think would we want to in socially, but I think there's a real opportunity just to let someone kind of teleport in for a minute, drive around, look around, pick something up off the floor that might be a trip hazard, that type of thing.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. If you look at sort of the Pareto of activities that are required there, maybe the robot can do only a portion of them, but a very important portion or something, Yeah.
I think I've got one, Julian.
Go ahead, Mark. Thanks.
So I've worked with teams in the hospital setting, in the surgical suite, they have these surgical trays that need to be set up. Usually each surgeon, each patient combination has its own kind of unique tray setup, which forces most hospitals to have dedicated teams of people that literally assemble these surgical trays by hand. And of course, everything has to be, sanitized, autoclaved, all that kind of stuff. It seems like a fantastic robotics application, considering the limited amount of space that is required and the amount of repetitive and semi-repetitive, as well as to some extent some customized emotion that I think could adapt well to robotics. But I guess I wanted to hear maybe what Aaron had to say.
Yeah, of course, every application, that really the details matter, right? If this particular bit of automation is the right fit, and generally, we're always very cautious to say, this robot is the thing that you need, right? There's lots of ways to solve a problem. Sometimes it's just people, right, better organized, and sometimes it could be more traditional automation, fixed automation. But for what we're doing, where we can really provide value, is when you need to have flexible automation around people, safely around people, right? So hospitals tend to be very dynamic. There's people coming and going. It's not a lot of footprint space. And so we have actually looked at sort of hospital-based applications for that reason, because of that sort of characteristic of that environment.
If you can save space alone, there's value, but these are expensive folks that have to work in difficult, settings. I'm not saying it's dangerous per se, but it is, high intensity. And, guess what? In a COVID scenario, you don't want necessarily a lot of people in the hospital that don't necessarily have to be there, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Although, we've also heard some horror stories about just selling into hospitals, the sales cycle, and managing fleets in hospitals. And so you have to really have a strong backbone if you're going to go down that path, even if there are opportunities there. The business case itself might be a little bit hard to get to.
I think Willem has a question.
Yeah. Charlie or Aaron, have you done any forecasting or prognosis of whether Moore's law can apply to the robotics world? Doubling the capability and cutting the cost in half on a very frequent cycle.
Well, we haven't done any sort of analysis. I'd say, just from having been in robotics for a long time, You know, if I look on 5-year cycles, it's kind of remarkable the progress we make in some areas, and in other areas, there's just very little progress, right? And traditionally, I'd always point to compute and now the acceleration of machine learning as something that we're just riding the coattails on that, and anything related to, you know, wireless technology, et cetera. All that stuff is just robotics is getting great benefit from, whereas mechanical things tend to not go on that curve. But there has been an exception, right? So it used to be that a nice motor, when I started my first company, a nice motor would cost me $200. And now because of the drone market and RC cars, you get these really nice high torque motors for 20 bucks out of China, right? And all the controllers and electronics that go with them. So even the mechanical spaces, there are places where there's progress getting made. And in fact, with our company, we do small volume, we're a small company, yet we're doing kind of low volume, low cost, relatively low cost, because the supply chain has changed, right? I can go and get parts drop shipped from China for my robot, and they show up in 2 weeks and to spec. And 10 years ago, I could have never done that. So at a systems level, I think we do see this sort of exponential growth, but probably not at a more level of growth.
But once you get past the physical structure, do you see that the capabilities of control and feedback and smartness is going to stay on that Moore's-like curve?
Personally, I think the answer is yes. I think we're going to see a lot of rapid development in capability. You need the hardware and you need good sensing, right? And so the sensing is being driven by, the consumer electronics space primarily. And then there's an assumption that the compute and machine learning and these other technologies follow along, which I think they are. So I would expect to see a rapid increase in capability, but it really does depend on the whole system coming along, including the mechanical system.
Because the smartness of your particular robot, that you can physically take it and grab it and change it and put it somewhere, and it knows where it is. Yes. I know 10 years ago, I was in the CNC world. That was just unfathomable that you could do anything of that nature,
Yeah, it's remarkable what can change in 10 years. So I'm optimistic 10 years from now, we will see robots like this out in the world in a meaningful way.
Also, just from the standpoint of, long term, we really do want it to be more affordable, more accessible. And so those economies of scale for the component technologies are hugely important to us. Yeah. As Aaron noticed, it's this weird mix, because there are some parts of the robot where the costs are not going to change unless our production volumes increase dramatically. But there are other things that even at small production values, they really do benefit from this Moore's law, like sensors for sure, computation for sure. And by the way, computation is like the #1 power consumer on the robot. So any improvement there, it's not just the advantage of, it can compute things it couldn't before. It's also, it takes less power to do it. And then battery technologies, obviously, there are huge forces pushing battery technologies. So it is a good place to be. And we plan to continue this iterative process so that we can take advantage of it and ride those curves over time. I mean, one thing for me, which is still just amazing, is that we have deep learning models that we ship with the robot. They're open source, they're off the shelf, they run on the CPU, and they work. They detect faces well, they can detect tables and objects, and we didn't have to do anything so we wrote some custom code to use them, but the computation was enough without costing a fortune, and we didn't have to train the models ourselves. And obviously there's huge investment in that area, so that's just going to be another place in which robots like these benefit.
One of the last comments I'd like to make is that I wish the best and most luck to both of you, and the chances are very good. But from a lean startup point of view, you sort of defy the golden rule. You're a solution in search of a problem instead of solving a problem with a solution, So,
Willem, in their defense, I've been teaching their approach in my class for almost 10 years, and you've been involved in half of that.
Yeah.
So I guess.
Mark, I'd love to know what to call it. What can we?
I call it technology-driven innovation. I mean,
Cool.
Look, who says the solution can't come before the problem? I mean, who says that the technology can't help define the best market? Every academic I talk to says I'm doing it the hard way. And my response is, I worked in technology companies long enough. It was pretty much the only way. You start with what you've got, and then you find the best place to put it, right? If you've got a CO2 absorbing technology, guess what? You're going to go where the CO2 is, right? And I've had students who say, aha, what a brilliant move. Well, not really. It's what every technology-driven organization does, right?
By the way, I love this. I have not heard this from. I wish more people would recognize that, because that was actually in the start of this adventure one of the hardest things, because everybody wants that. They're like, oh, you're not specifying the problem well enough, and I was really skeptical in terms of how the world really works. It sounds great if you're a business person, but if you're a technologist, technology is often the #1 constraint. It's the hardest thing to understand. It's where you get your differentiation as a business is your technology.
Right. And why pick an application? You don't pick an application that doesn't adequately leverage the technology you've got. So, right. I mean, if some other technology can do it better, let them do it. Right.
Totally. I mean, it's this, both are important. I think the main thing is both are important, and finding that sweet spot.
Right.
It's not trivial. It's an iterative process. At least that's our approach. We're very iterative. That's our approach.
The other analogy I like to use is, in tennis, you have a good backhand and a good forehand. Otherwise, you're not really much of a tennis player. Look, we can start with the market, right? But here's another observation that might blow your mind a little bit. When you do start with the market, you're more likely to have an incremental innovation, okay? When you start with the technology, that's something that's a radical technology to begin with, you can actually have a radical innovation. Ask Elon Musk. He lives for this stuff, right? He doesn't start with the market. He says, what technology have I got? Solar panels. I've got electric cars. I've got boring machines that bore holes faster. He's got spacecraft, right? The spacecraft is looking for something to put in its as a payload, right? It doesn't start with the market and say, how can my spacecraft adapt to this? It doesn't really work that way. The funny thing is the Siegel design boys hate it. And when I walk over, the C parts and nobody wants to talk to me. So this is anti-Siegel. I get it. The design folks love to start with the market and I salute them, but it's not the only way, right?
Oh, love hearing this. This is great. Thank you.
Let's get together and write the book, Charlie. Because that's the only thing missing. There's no book that backs us up. So the two of us are lone wolves in the wilderness, right?
Happy to be a case study after we've been successful.
Okay, all right. In other words, you're saying, let me write the book. Okay, I got it.
But at the same time, though, there are people buying these robots for different use cases. There's a lot of people that have, provided some inbound interest for the team. We won't go over all of the use cases, but can I share, Aaron and Charlie, can I share the Microsoft one in the IEEE?
Yeah, that one's public. That one's public.
Yeah.
And we're profitable, by the way. We're lean but profitable. Our first product addresses a problem that people want to build, explore this stuff, and we have real customers.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll just read this. I don't know if you guys could see this okay. This is from the IEEE Spectrum. This was, when was this? This was in January, right? Oh, no, December, right? So one of the early adopters of Stretch, so that's their platform, the Hello Robot platform, is Microsoft, which used the robot as part of a company-wide hackathon last summer. A Microsoft developer, Sid, has cerebral palsy. While Sid has no trouble writing code with his toes, there are some everyday tasks like getting a drink of water that he regularly needs help with. Sid started a hackathon team with Microsoft employees and interns to solve this problem with Stretch. Although most of the team knew very little about robotics, over just 3 days of remote work, they were able to program Stretch to operate semi-autonomously through voice control. Now Stretch can manipulate objects, including cups of water, at Sid's request. It's still just a prototype, but Microsoft says has already made the code open source so that others can benefit from the work. Sid is still working with Stretch to teach it to be even more useful. So that's pretty cool. And then I mean, it just goes on to say, in the past, Charlie's robot of choice has been a $400,000, 227 kilogram robot called PR2. Stretch offers many of the same mobile manipulation capabilities, but its friendly size and much lower cost mean that people who before might not have considered buying a robot are now giving Stretch a serious look. And so what's interesting is, you know, I've gone to and talked to, you know, industry, warehouse, palliative care, and senior care. And, you know, like I'll start talking to like a senior care facility, for instance, and they're like, hey, you know, what we really need from a technology perspective is we need to help these nurses, their lives to be easier. One thing that they say is, like, especially during this pandemic, is we can't hire enough nurses. There's not enough people that want to care for, you know, the elderly, right? Like, who wants to go do a 12-hour shift overnight and change bedpans? Who wants to count pills? Who wants to do all these things? And so without even me, you know, bringing up the topic, they said, what we really need is like a robot that works alongside of our nurses and our healthcare staff. And so these are the use cases that can be unlocked with this type of technology. And so I think it's really exciting. I mean, I'm very fortunate to know Aaron and Charlie, and just really blessed to be able to be alive today to be able to see these things take place. So I think it's really exciting. Cool. Other questions from anyone?
Yeah, I have a question, but first I want to interject as somebody who recently purchased a mobile manipulation robot 2 years ago. I really see, we actually have a Rethink Sawyer robot on top of a Ridgeback, and the all-in, we had the Sawyer already, but the all-in cost for that is probably 4 or 5 times what this is. And I just see so many clever things that it's like, I wish I had in that robot right now. And I actually do see a lot of problems, at least from a technical robotics side, that appear to be addressed and solved by some of the unique design features on this, such as the Cartesian nature of the robot and whatnot. But the question I wanted to ask was about dexterity. And I know that I feel like dexterity goes against simple in a way, but do you see a role for as your company in particular in increasing the dexterity over the two-pronged gripper, and how do you see that playing a part in this in the long term?
Well, you know, when we designed Stretch, we were being very thoughtful about the minimal robot. What's the least number of actuators we can have to be useful, right? And if you think about kind of the problem it's solving, in a sense, it's how do I place a payload? It could be a gripper, it could be a camera, at some place at some time in a space around people, right, in a home. And so what we have, the primary degrees of freedom do that, right? You can place that tool XYZ, you know, as a picture of your home like a giant milling machine. Now you can place it there, and what you place there is up, you know, there's lots of flexibility there, right? So we have an open interface. You can add more dexterous things. We are working on more dexterity there, but in some cases you don't need that. You know, we've seen a use case where there's just a camera, right? You want to be able to inspect and get really close, and you can't do that with a telepresence robot. So, you know, I think it's good to have the flexibility there. I do think as manipulation becomes more capable, then we'll be driven towards more dexterity. But right now, I think there's a lot we can do without it.
Yeah, thank you. I agree.
Really appreciate that you see some of what we're trying to do. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I especially think like one thing that can be scary with robots is a non-Cartesian robot is a user doesn't expect how it's going to move. And this is very predictable, which I think seems like a huge benefit.
Oh, I love that you see that too. Yeah, I mean, the number over decades of robotics, you know, the number of times I've seen people take a standard rotary joint arm and they just want to like hand out an object. and they do a plan, and all of a sudden it's like going all over the place. And all you really wanted was for it to just go along a straight line. It's nice to have something where that's kind of its natural thing to do.
Matt, both University of Illinois, I can say this publicly, but University of Illinois, I'm on a health tech advisory board. So they have a stretch, as well as University of Chicago. There's a researcher down there too. So if you want to take a look at one or join the club at, with Northwestern and stuff, I think, you'll see this to be soon like maybe a platform of choice within some of the research robotics areas.
Yeah, I definitely looking into it more. I could probably ask questions all day about various technical things, but I won't subject everyone to that.
If you go to computing, it's less well known, but in the history of computing, I think our better analogy for us is actually like the PDP series. There's the PDP 11, PDP 12, and it was this iterative series of mini computers, and they were primarily in labs, but that was DEC, which was a hugely successful company in its day. And I think that's kind of where we are. We're not at really the personal computer yet, but it's on the road.
Those PDPs were deployed all over the place, well beyond labs, but not certainly in consumer settings, certainly not in the home, but they were surrogates for the mainframe that people couldn't afford and frankly, in many cases, didn't even need. I'm trying to count the number of axes on your machine, and I'm as an old robotics engineer, 3, 4, 5. It was easy to count. I'm losing count how many degrees of freedom you have on your machine.
Oh, okay, one for the left wheel, one for the right wheel, one for the lift, one for the telescoping arm, and then there's one for the wrist, which is yaw. So from the floor to the end effector, it's 5 degrees of freedom.
Okay.
Then there are 2 degrees of freedom up here for the camera.
Got it. Okay.
And one of the things that is great about this is only one of these degrees of freedom has to deal with gravity, which is the lift.
So that's the only place you need it to be weight bearing.
And that's why this is really, we want this to be really lightweight. And if with serial chain arms, one of the big problems is they have to have a shoulder motor, which is really huge because it has to deal with either that or it has to have some very clever counterbalancing thing, because it's got gravity pushing on the entire arm out there.
You're using micro steppers or servos or both?
Funny you should ask. I don't know how much. It's not that you can't find these things out, but we usually don't make it public.
Okay. Can I ask if there's a lead screw involved? No, there's no lead screw, right?
No lead screw.
Okay, that shows how old I am. We actually use lead screws. So.
And Charlie, I know Jim asked a question. Oh, Charlie, you're on.
The prototype in my lab did use a lead screw, so you shouldn't feel off at all.
Okay, I am somewhat antiquated. The gray is there. Trust me, great. So
Charlie and Aaron, Jim was asking a question earlier about like moving larger type of medical equipment at home, right? So what do you guys foresee in the roadmap? Or maybe I could ask Jim.
Go for it, Aaron. Go for it.
Sorry, I only heard part of the question.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Jim, maybe ask like what type of equipment would you need to move, and how much would it weigh, and then maybe Aaron and Charlie could talk about their roadmap.
Yeah, maybe say for a home IV patient, you might need to hang a 1 liter bag of IV solution. Maybe a saline or a drug, injected in the saline. So you got the weight of 1 liter of fluid.
Yeah.
So that should be 1 kilogram, and we're supposed to be at 1.5 kilograms. That's what we're spec'd for the workspace. So in that particular case, it's plausible it could work with this. Just I think one of the things Julian is alluding to is one of the things we like about this design is that it scales easily. So if we see market pull where higher payload or bigger workspace is valuable, we made it so that the base is about the size or width of a Roomba because we wanted it to be able to maneuver really well. But if you increase the width of that base, you get this factor of increase, it's like maybe 4x or something in terms of how far the telescoping arm can reach. And so it's very favorable for scaling up. We wanted to go for sort of a minimal first offering. We'll see if we ever get that kind of pull and have the fun of making a larger one, but it's fun to think about.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, when COVID first broke, we have a lot of infusion pumps in the market, and nurses didn't want to go up and go into rooms where there were COVID patients because of the risk, and also because they kept wasting their PPE, going in and out of the rooms. So there was this huge, last March, this huge issue. And before that, the FDA would never let us talk about remote controlling pumps or remote alarms. They wouldn't even talk about it, right? If we brought it up. All of a sudden, there was a guidance from the FDA on doing emergency use remote control for IV pumps. It was shocking. It was like an overnight flip,
I had not heard that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, just an example though of how remote control can how these kinds of things can change the environment.
That's cool. That's amazing.
As somebody who goes to the supermarket quite a bit, I can think of probably 6 use cases just from that one location alone. The supermarket, whether it's the guy in the produce who's picking off the dead leaves from the fresh produce so that whatever remains still looks fresh, that's very time consuming. Or bagging groceries or restocking a shelf. These are very repetitive tasks that I think are not too difficult to program and don't require a huge amount of weight either. Maybe the shopping bag could get heavy, but I think if all you're doing is populating the bag with individual items, let the customer carry the bag away, that might be a use case right there.
It's funny you say that. We actually happen to have a friend that's doing robotics in grocery stores. Louise, I don't know if you want to jump in here, or if you're still there or listening. Oh, maybe he's gone.
Sorry, yeah, you were talking. Sorry, I just got a call. Sorry, I missed the question.
Oh, no worries. Mark was just talking about going to the grocery store and being able to do things like picking or identifying holes in shelves and things like that. Maybe you want to talk about what you're doing.
Yeah, so we're basically, so we think there's several steps to automating the grocery space, and we think that during the next years of evolution, the customers are going to continue to buy in the store. So our approach is, first step is to digitize the store. So we're basically having the robot go by and figure out exactly where everything is. So we basically have coordinates for where every product is. And once you have that, then a whole world of applications opens up, because you now have a digital twin of the store, and you can start to, as opposed to what they do today, which is manipulate things physically, now you can actually add modern compute power and systems to do more things moving into the future. And actually having a robot that picks is something that we're actually working on in like longer term, but we got some government grants, and we're working on that. But that all starts with knowing exactly where the product is. So that's like step one.
Well, one thing that's pretty stationary are people's mailboxes. So I would think that a postal delivery system is pretty, straightforward here, right? Most mail is pretty lightweight. I think once it becomes pre-sorted into the bag, so it's a question of just stuffing the postal items into the mailbox, and in some cases having to open the door. But I think you've got a manipulator that can handle that. No? Are you guys thinking about postal service?
No, we're contrary to what you were saying before. Our approach is we look for the problem and then use existing technology or companies that are working to solve the problem to basically put it together, kind of like the approach Amazon does, or it's basically looking for a problem that will make your customers better or happier.
Yeah. And then where the technology can shine. Right?
Yeah. We're not as a company, as a philosophy, we are developing things to advance but we're focusing on the customer. And in this case, we're totally focused on helping anybody that needs information from the retail store, and we're using robotics to do something that is just not it's not possible to do today, given that the physical nature of this industry and the fact that they haven't really progressed into this realm.
Right. The ROI has got to be amazing. You got an $18,000 machine that can replace, it can work 24/7, right? So it's replacing 3.5 people, right?
With the pandemic, we have customers that have 80 pickers doing, and our initial estimates show that one picker can replace up to eight to 10 people. So
for less than $20,000.
Exactly. No, it'll probably be more than that, but yeah, but eventually, yes. Exactly. It's at volume and kind of figuring out the right way to do it. Yeah.
That's amazing. Totally amazing.
Yeah.
You can justify that in 5 minutes.
Yep. The thing is to make it work. So going to your earlier point, you got to make it work, you know?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's easy to conceptualize the robot or the application, but you can spend months trying to get it to work just right.
Exactly. And that's what we're working. We've been working on that since 2018 on that robot.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as an example, you know, we started in 2017 based on a prototype in my lab and didn't launch until July. So, you know, real robots are hard. That was after about 10 iterations of robots. So it's a challenge. I think one of the things I'm curious about, Louis, would be, you know, what does it take for you to decide to jump on a pre-existing, you know, robotic solution in the areas, or at least part of the solution? Because, you know, like an example of something we're seeing in terms of why a platform makes sense is that we're building this community, there's this ecosystem. So then a lot of people are we've got lots of different organizations building on top of it and offering software for it.
Yep.
Some of it's, you know, overlapping software, but it provides this, you know, we're beginning to create this ecosystem where if someone wants to build something and create their own value, you know, they can build on top of all this stuff that's out there, and they can pick and choose what works best. And then if they want to hire students, well, these students at these various universities, they already know how to use this stuff.
Exactly.
Whereas if like you're building something totally custom, and I understand there are places to do that, but if you know, then you're on your own, everything, you're doing it yourself. And then if you want to bring people in to work on it, well, they're not going to have had experience with it. So I'm curious, you know, about your perspective about those trade-offs.
So a little bit of, so I've like throughout my career, so I've been this is my third company trying to do the same thing. So
okay. Persistence. That's awesome.
Yeah. I've just like, so actually in the 90s, you know, we started putting track cameras on the roofs of these retail stores, right? So, and basically the thesis was, you know, you have the grocery industry or the retail industry is the most distributed industry on the planet. And so wouldn't it be valuable to basically use the images to turn those images from images into data, and then provide that data so that this industry could use the data to better manage their things. So that was the idea. We did it. Turned out that, you know, putting these track cameras on the roof was very, very expensive, maintenance and all that. And the grocery industry doesn't really have a lot of margin to do that. And especially since we are focused on operations. So I sold that company and moved, and then started doing the same thing, but now using fixed cameras instead of the track cameras. And then started using, we were advancing how we were using how to capture the images and turn it into data, but we started focusing on customer service. So we started doing things like how long the lines are at the supermarket, how long does an associate take to, if you're looking for a product and you need help at a Home Depot, who helps you and how long do they take, those kind of metrics, and out of stock. And at the time, I actually went and we started putting fixed cameras on the shelves. And we actually had Coca-Cola buy into the idea. And, you know, and at first we did a pilot for about a year or something. And then the CIO gives me a call and says, your hard work is paid off. the CEO has made this the project for the year. And it was like, when my investors were getting kind of, edgy and all this we had gone through like $20 million. And about a month later, they call me and say that the SVP of operations of Coca-Cola had taken the project down because it was just not practical. So anyway, I went to see because nobody tells you the truth here. So he didn't want to even talk to me because he knew I was going to be kind of pissed off. But basically what he did, I said, just tell me the truth. I'm not here to, get the project back on track. And he said, your data is your thing is too disruptive. You're asking Coca-Cola to invest in cameras. It's not going to work for us. And Coca-Cola's doing great. We don't need to do this. And anyway, but after his explanation, I understood, and it was not very scalable. So about a month later, I get a call from Home Depot, and the CIO from Coca-Cola had been talking to this guy, and he said, "Hey, can you come out and see me?" And I go, "Yeah, sure." And we were referred to as the best image recognition that he had seen and working in the space. And basically, so I pitched to the Home Depot guy who said he had an idea, and I said, and so anyway, I pitched him the whole thing. He basically, destroys the idea as the other guy had done, and I go, "So why'd you call me? Why am I here?" And he goes, "Because I got a better idea." And I said, "What idea do you have?" And he goes, "I want you to build me a robot." And I said, "A what?" And imagine, I've been in the space, and actually those track cameras were robots. And then he starts giving me the solution. He's saying, "Why are you going to put all these cameras? People are going to knock them down. They're going to take them out. Why not just have this autonomous robot go around?" And it was like, wow, like a light bulb. It was more than a light bulb. It was like, I don't know what went off in my head, but it was like, Jesus, this is. So anyway, I went back to the board, got some more money to do it, because the board basically said, if I want to build a robot, they're like, after $20 million, are we going to just, just flush the toilet on this? Anyway, we got the thing, and long story short, after about a year and a half, we just could not handle the data. And what happened is that 4 years later, with all the AI and the machine learning, now we could do everything that we could have dreamed of doing in 2013. This was 2013. Now it's 2017, 18. And that's when we started Zipline, this company. And we've actually, because we're looking at it from how do you solve a problem, we've been very, very practical and very, very cash efficient. And so, yeah, so it looks big. It looks good. It's really working out.
That's great. Very cool.
Yeah.
But I didn't get the answer to using custom hardware versus like a platform. And when do you make the decision to use a platform versus build your own?
Yeah. So the philosophy there is, you try to use whatever's out there. So you start with a minimal viable product, and you look at what portions of that solution are actually out there, or you can find somebody to do it better than you. But you always have to understand what your core is, and make sure that, because you might find somebody that does something, but if it's not in your core, then you got to get somebody else to do it and try to get a partner. Now that's hard because, like you guys were saying before, it's what are you good at, and where do you have your experience, and what is your dream, where do you want to go? So it's tough, but I think the whole key about building businesses is understanding what your core is, understanding what your core is not, what you don't want to do, and then bring in partners and get people to jump on your bandwagon and kind of make them want to be part of this bigger thing. And as I was looking at your presentation and looking at the robot, I was kind of thinking to myself, hey, wouldn't that be, I was already thinking about how to use those arms to use that as a picker. So.
Okay, we should talk more then outside of this, because that would be cool.
and I think this is the whole idea that Julian's trying to.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, great to meet you, and very cool story.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
I just like connecting cool people.
So Charlie, I
Yeah,
think to
thanks a
answer your question from my classroom setting, what I tell people, or at least I tell my students, is if you're trying to compete with an ecosystem, and if you don't have an equal or better ecosystem, it's going to be very difficult to compete, because the learning curve of an individual on custom hardware is going to be so much steeper than a community working on a standardized platform, right?
Yeah.
It's like saying, let's compete with Unix. Let's compete with iOS. Why don't we compete with Android? There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a great example. My gosh. I mean, just seeing the rise of Linux, and, you know, Microsoft at one point, there was nothing bigger and scarier, and yet Linux, it's everywhere. It won so big.
Well, how about just start with Wikipedia? So
Yeah.
Wikipedia was a crowdsourced encyclopedia that cost nothing to develop, and it competed with Microsoft that spent billions of dollars on Encarta, and most of that money was trashed because they couldn't keep up with the community. The community of volunteers who worked for nothing, right?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because like two of the greatest human creations in my mind are Wikipedia and Linux, and yet they're not out of a traditional, you know, free market kind of financially driven thing, which it just blows my mind. But
yeah, I ask my students, why would anyone who's an engineer contribute their time and energy to something that they don't get paid for? They're not getting paid for it, right? And they scratch their head because they're all mercenaries, right? And I say, how about recognition? How about the idea that you contributed to something bigger than yourself? How about being the best engineer at the moment in that one specific area?
Yep, coming from Dallas with this entrepreneurial and investing mindset to MIT, and then seeing Richard Stallman talk about GPL, I was just like, what the hell is this? It took me a long time to get it. It really did. It took me a long time. It was interesting. There was this, you know, point in question about sort of Moore's law, and I don't know. I wish there were some way of coining it, or there was some name. Maybe it exists, but yeah, there's also this thing about this open source world that we get to tap into, that's just growing and increasing, and like, it's just amazing what Aaron and I and our company were able to put together that we never would have been able to put together in the past, because we could draw on these resources. And it's definitely exponential, whatever it is. And if there were some law associated with it, people might pay more attention to it. There needs to be some coining, because it's real, and man, it matters.
And it's because you're leveraging platforms, right? So have you thought about starting at the low end with maybe a telepresence robot that can be commoditized, that can leverage what you've learned, but actually embody it in a much simpler, cheaper, smaller device? Because I'll tell you, I could buy a telepresence robot tomorrow for my classroom. All I need is one absent professor, and I got to cancel a class? I don't think so. I'm going to have them dial into the telepresence robot, right?
One of the things we decided early on is you know, we're about manipulation. This robot is about manipulation, because they're, you know, telepresence robots make a lot of sense. There are places where it just seems like a natural fit, but it's also this hyper competitive space with so many entrants, and it's really hard to distinguish.
And nobody dominates. It seems like nobody dominates, right?
No one dominates, and which is, I think it's a loss, because without anyone dominating, it's just at some point, and now I would have appreciated some consolidation in that area, because there's real value to be delivered, but it's just a mess. But we really want to be somewhere else and deliver manipulation and this reaching. That's what gives us this edge. And at least right now, we have this rare situation where we are just, at least technologically, in just a completely different part of the space, which, you know, it's exciting, but we also know we need to run, because we won't always be like that.
Well, you've got an exciting product and technology there, so I'm really happy for you. Julian, it's about 8:35. We're down to about 7 folks. Do you think we should just cut it off?
Yeah, I think we could break, and I could make some of those intros. Luis and Aaron and Charlie,
Yeah,
so I think you guys want to meet, and then Matt as well. I could introduce you to Aaron and Charlie.
Well, I want to thank you all for a great session. I mean, I really got engaged. I think a lot of the audience did as well. Thank you, Julian, for pulling this together. It was well worth it, and we'll have to do it again soon. I love robotics. I think I can count 3 generations of robotic, if you want to call them frontiers. You know, the 60s with CNC, the robotic arms that were the 2nd generation that were industrial. And then I think this is at least maybe the 3rd or 4th generation where we're seeing the integration with, you know, vision systems and mobility and intelligence and AI. So I think this is an amazing, amazing step forward. So thank you all.
Thank you. I learned a lot actually. So this was great. I really appreciate the event. Julian, Mark, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you all, guys.
All right. Should I shut it down at this point, Julian?
Yeah, let's shut it down. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.